What's up, everybody? Thralls of Metal here. I'm Jammin Jon.
Shredlord. Necrotic Nick.
And we are bringing you the long-awaited ranking for the Black Dahlia Murder. I first became a Black Dahlia Murder fan shortly after Unhallowed was released. My friend Rich showed it to me and said, check this out. It's a lot heavier than what you're used to. Because at that point in the game, really, I wasn't into death metal even, really. But yeah, he showed me Unhallowed, and he said, this is really cool. And I listened to it, and I said, you're right. It is really cool. And I've just been a fan ever since.
I got in this band when I heard one of their songs on a Metal Blade compilation. I believe it was called Uncorrupted Steel. It was the song Contagion. I was like, dude, this is pretty solid. And I didn't go out and get the album that it was off of immediately, but then I saw them at Ozfest 2005, and they were easily one of the best bands on the second stage. Absolutely blew me away. They just had this amazing energy to them. Saw them the next year at Sounds the Underground, and went out and got their second album, and yeah, became an instant fan. I've been listening to this band pretty much ever since, and yeah, they're just an absolute blast. Beat.
I'm not sure when I heard this band, probably around when they came out, because we're from near where they're from. I don't know. I did not like this band until I saw them live, which was probably around sometime when they first came out, since they're around where we were around. They pretty much got every opening gig for every band that came in the area for about 10 years.
Yeah, right?
If it wasn't them, it was Hatebreed, and if it wasn't Hatebreed, it was both of them.
Yeah, I got some on the same bill.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
I didn't get into the Black Dahlia Murder till much later on in my musical listening career. I think the first album I actually listened to in full would be Nightbringers, which wasn't all that long ago. Once again, being from our backyard, I was aware of who they were, but at the time, I just didn't clamp into them, didn't really lock in and see what they were all about until later on.
Elizabeth Short knew who they were.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Put a smile on her face.
Make the world a better place.
She's famous.
Her head opens like Pac-Man.
Pez. It's Pez. She's a Pez dispenser.
So for those of you that don't know, the Black Dahlia Murder is an American melodic death metal band formed in 2000, although they didn't have a full band until January of 2001. They're from Waterford, Michigan, which for us is legit almost in our backyard. It's probably an hour north of here, so yeah, I mean, we've all seen the Black Dahlia Murder quite a few times, except maybe this guy, as a result of them being so close to us. So after they finally formed a band, in May of 2001, they released What a Horrible Night to Have a Curse. Independently, it's still considered metalcore at this point. It's the only album featuring Sean Gavro on bass. The title of the EP was derived from Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest.
Yep. The game sucks, by the way.
And then in between times of that release and the next one, they released an album that isn't actually quoted anywhere. And the only reason I know about it is because Nick has it, the Bias of Ann demo. This is probably the most rare item that Necrotic Nick owns with all this bullshit back here. But yeah, the Bias of Ann demo, that's cool that you have it, because not a lot of people have that.
50 other people have it, or
In
49.
Fact, 49 people, in fact.
And then in May of 2002, the band releases an EP called A Cold-Blooded Epitaph on Love Lost Records. Bassist Dave Locke replaces Sean Gavro. In 2003, after playing Milwaukee Metal Fest, the band leaves Love Lost Records and signs to Metal Blade Records. And so, on June 7th of 2003, now signed to Metal Blade Records, the Black Dahlia Murder releases Unhallowed. Recorded at Cloud City Studios in Detroit. I think I've been there, at least been by there. Isn't that over by Harpo's?
I don't know, man. Harpo's, there's a lot of things by Harpo's, like burning cars and potholes you can swim in.
Or 12-year-olds with 9mm in their waistband.
If it's, you're lucky it's just a 9mm.
Well, it was 2 a.m.
Produced by Mike Hasty of Walls of Jericho, the band now at this point is Trevor Strnad on vocals, John Campanian on guitars, Brian Eschbach, who's still with the Black Dahlia Murder, on backing vocals and guitars, Corey Grady on drums, and David Locke on bass. I had this record at number 2. This is the first Black Dahlia Murder record, of course, that I ever heard, and I've jammed this record 1,000 times, and I love pretty much every moment of this record. It sounds heavier and darker and more raw than pretty much anything they have. Mostly, I think, just because an early on recording. This album was actually one of the albums responsible for getting me into death metal. So, I mean, that's kind of where I sit with this anyway. Filled with darker tremolos. I always thought the vocals were particularly vicious on this, mostly because it's, again, I think the first one I ever heard. Tons more death growls. Something that I found in the Black Dahlia Murder that I liked early on was the death growls. Dude, the drum accents on Contagion are awesome. Thy Horror Cosmic, man, at the time, that was one of the heaviest songs I ever heard. That straight double kick through that song is just amazing. So many catchy riffs on When the Last Grave Has Emptied, Hymn for the Wretched, the blasts and the tremolos. I don't know. I just have always loved this record. Again, it's nostalgia for me at this point. So, number 2.
I had it at number 5, pretty much in the middle of the road. Probably was the first thing I heard. It is very raw. You should probably powder it, or lotion it, or both. Thy Cosmic Horror, just... Closed Casket Requiem is awesome. Yeah. 5.
I had this at number 4. This was technically the second album I got into by Black Dahlia Murder, and it kind of came at an interesting point. I was really into metalcore and melodic death metal at this point, and this band kind of sat in there. Like, you listen to this album, you're going to hear a ton of At the Gates riffs, but you're also going to hear a ton of blast beats. So, as even the band described, they were like melodic death metal, but with like an American filter, like a lot of like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide kind of splashed in with that, very Gothenburg sound. And I think this is a really solid first attempt. Like, Contagion's still a really big standout, that big, slow, doomy intro to it. And I love the harmonies on When the Last Grave Has Emptied in particular. It's a good building block for their sound. Yeah, it's a lot more raw sounding than anything else they would put out. But overall, it's just got like solid riffs, good melodic hooks. It's still brutal as hell. There's a little bit of Carcass Worship in there, which Carcass Worship shows up intermittently in their discography, and I never complain about Carcass Worship. But yeah, overall, this is just a solid start here and a good foundation to build upon.
For me, this is my number 8 album. It is a good foundation for them to start upon, but to me, the first couple albums, especially this one, was just, in my opinion, their version of trying to write their own Slaughter of the Soul. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's not a very original thing to do. And as we go on, they have more of their own voice and their own sound. And it's a big reason why some of this felt. Other reasons would be like, where's the bass? Anyone notice that there's really no bass going on?
I mean,
I know it's early production. I have some minor gripes with it here and there as far as production goes, but once again, it was their first take, and not that it's bad by any stretch of the means. Their guitar player, not bad. Very basic, executed well, but the leads are very, very basic. And where's the bass?
Yeah, the leads really aren't like on there very much either. Like, they're just kind of
they're sparingly, but when they're there, they're very basic, but they're executed well.
And let's be honest, 2003, like, every band was jogging At the Gates riffs.
Yeah.
That and In Flames too.
Yep.
But it is definitely a product of its time.
So then a couple years go by, as they do for most bands, and on July the 12th of 2005, on Metal Blade Records, the Black Dahlia Murder releases Miasma. This was recorded at Red Planet Studios. Zach Gibson replaces Cody Grady on drums. Cody, take care of yourself. That was a good effort. I appreciate the drums on Unhallowed. This was the first album in Black Dahlia Murder's catalog that I actually bought a physical copy of. Like, now I have all of them, but this was the first one I ever really bought. I remember being initially disappointed by the lesser growls on the album and more high screams, because when Unhallowed came out, I was big into death growls, and then I was like, there's not a lot of death growls on here. This is my number 4. Initially, I wasn't digging this album right off the bat due to the slightly more polished production. Like, I liked that raw sound, and I was like, this sounds just a little bit more clean, and I don't know if that's for me. I never liked the thin drum mix either right off the bat. Over time, though, this album grew on me quite a bit. I'm charming, super chuggy. The lead work is pretty good, although the lead tone I think could use a little bit of warmth. Statutory Ape, all the harmonies in the hook, that's just a badass song. A Vulgar Picture, an intense, riffy, melodic bastard. I'm not going to go through them all because I'm going to leave some song titles for this. I like Dave Goes to Hollywood. It's just a fun song title. it's a pretty nasty song, but it's a fun song title.
Sounds like you had fun.
Yep. Anyway, overall for me, number 4.
For me, I ranked this at number 7. Nothing wrong with it, again. However, this just kind of felt like take 2 or B-sides of Unhallowed with a little bit of metalcore thrown in the mix. Drumming got better, thank goodness. No offense to the first drummer, but it was a little sloppy and at times. The guitar solos got a little bit more adventurous. Once again, very safe, but executed very well. There was a little more creativity. I felt like this was an improved album versus the first. Had a little bit more heft, a little bit less melody, but one of the things that I noticed is a lot of these songs just kind of ran together as far as like there wasn't a lot of individual identity in the songs for me to be like, oh, this one, or this stood out to me. So for that reason, I put it at number 7.
I have it at number 4. This probably was the first album where I got them because I probably saw them around this time. The production is better, and I like that because with fast, nutty music, I want to know what's going on. Like, what are you doing? Fast, yes, but The songs I think are a little better. The silly song titles. Frankie Goes to Hollywood. No, David. Statutory Ape, of course, about a apist. When you're walking down a dark alley at night, you don't want to get aped.
The King Kong sequel that never should have been made. Thankfully hasn't.
So we got the gorilla, right? And he forces himself. No. Vulgar Picture is awesome. Yeah, this is a lot of nostalgia, I'm sure. But yeah, this should have been the first album. I don't know. Maybe.
I had this at number 1. This is my favorite. This also plays heavily on nostalgia. I saw them on tour for this album in particular, I think, 3 times.
Probably a couple of those.
And everything about them just kind of tightened up on here. Like, this album is still melodic, still got its good catchy bits. I mean, like, Statutory Ape has some really intricate harmonies on there that I think are awesome. And I think got a little bit more technical, too. But, man, this thing likes to chug. Right away with the opening of Built for Sin, like, it just sets you up with those slow, brooding chugs, and then right into I'm Charming. That is a great 1-2 punch. I love every single second of this album. Like, Novelty Crosses, nice and sinister and dark. The tremolos on the title track are some of the catchiest I think they've ever written. And Vulgar Picture, that song's special to me because it's been my ringtone on my phone for like 15 years.
Can confirm.
Yeah.
Yep, me too.
If you call me, like, yeah, you heard that song. But, I mean, everything on this album I think is absolutely fantastic. And it kind of stands out as like the one where I think they made the biggest improvement overall in songwriting and production. Like, this is kind of their big coming out party despite having 2 kind of bad album covers in a row. It'll get better, but it's, I don't know. It's not the best album cover. Neither was Unhallowed. But again, it gets better.
Yeah.
I think Miasma is the worst of the 2.
Possibly
the worst album cover they have.
I don't know. It doesn't make Vegas look pleasant.
No.
It does recall the great Spinal Tap album, Smell the Glove. You got it when you talk about bad album covers. I mean, you got to think about Smell the Glove.
Well, Shark Sandwich. I mean, come on.
Wow.
Or Intravenous de Milo.
Well, Shark Sandwich was really just one big shit sandwich.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. So moving onward, 2 years later, on September 18th of 2007, still on Metal Blade Records. Actually, they're still on Metal Blade Records, so I'm going to stop saying Metal Blade Records. They're on Metal Blade Records the entire time from this point out.
You said Metal Blade Records again.
Coming out on September 18th of 2007, Nocturnal. Jason Sukoff is now at the helm of this album. Bassist Dave Locke is fired for incompetence, at least that's what Trevor said.
Ouch.
I don't know what the case was. I didn't really dig into that.
Or incontinence.
I mean,
I think it was impotence.
Oh. Makes sense.
Yeah. All these things sound bad.
Sometime after the touring and release of Miasma, Bart Williams joins the band on bass, where he will stay for a number of years. And drummer Shannon Lucas replaces Zach Gibson. Shannon Lucas is a fuck of a drummer. I saw him with Guar at Headliners playing in a band called Mens Rea.
Yes, sir.
Not a lot of people know of that band,
Yes,
but that
sir.
band was super fucking sweet, and that's the first time I saw Shannon Lucas, and he was a beast then. So I knew what I was getting into when he joined Black Dahlia Murder. Last album for longtime guitarist John Companion. Album debuted at number 72 on the Billboard 200. So this is my number 5. The songs are short, but man, are they riffy. It's noticeably more focused and mean. Every time the groove hits in this record, it needs a restraining order. Just plain and simple. This album is heavy and nasty. The lead tones now have really come alive more, I think. They just sound a lot warmer and crunchier, more present. Even the rhythm guitars, I think, are noticeably more crunchy and present. Tons of riffs. Once again, although I loved Zach Gibson's drumming, Shannon Lucas is the man. Everything Went Black is a banger right out of the gate. What a Horrible Night to Have a Curse, dude. Those triplet chugs in that song are just... And I've heard that song so many times in so many places, it's almost iconic at this point. I Only Worship What You Bleed has mean riffs. Nocturnal, dude, the leads in Nocturnal are awesome. And the spoken word at the end is a clip from Monsters. So, that's pretty neat. And then the song Warborn. I can just picture Trevor leading the crowd. So yeah, it's number 5 for me. I think the record's awesome.
I also had this record at number 5. With a lot of discographies we rank, I notice the second or the third album, the band finally pops. To me, this is when the band popped. The album has a much different vibe to me, in a good way. It's much more unique to them. I can hear the musicianship continuously improve on each album. The songwriting seems improved as well. Like the way they're piecing things together or putting certain riffs together, it really felt like it had a good pacing as far as that goes. One thing I noticed too is Trevor seemed to get settled in on this album. The first couple albums, he writes a lot of lyrics, right? He writes a lot of lyrics. So when you're trying to cram in a lot of lyrics, sometimes there's a lot of vocals going on. I felt like the pacing and his delivery was really good on this album as far as knowing when to put the vocals in, knowing when to let the guitars do the talking, knowing when, you know, as far as just taking command of knowing what to do and where to put it. And yeah, I thought this was a great album, man. Number 5.
I had this at number 3. I got this the day it came out. I mean, I was eager to hear what would follow Miasma. And this one is, again, I would agree with Shred here, the one that kind of made him break out a little bit. You had an iconic album cover done by Necrolord, you know, first in a run of good album covers. And the songs, again, they retained that brutality, but they were catchy. And, like, I mean, honestly, What a Horrible Night to Have a Curse. The fact that that's a Castlevania reference was already pretty cool and kind of showcased their, you know, fun nerdiness. But the song itself is just brutal. That is some of the most savage, syncopated chugs you will hear on any death metal album. I think the melodies pop out a little bit more, especially the guitar harmonies. I will say that John's lead work, while it did improve in some spots, felt more exposed just because, like, the rest of the band, again, continuously tightening up, sounding better.
I will
His
agree.
leads, they were mostly just like lead melodies, like just something to kind of accompany the riff. There wasn't a lot of like flashiness or like really dynamic phrasing. Like it was just kind of following a very steady meter, not trying to like, you know, raise the song up a notch, just kind of complimenting it. And that was one of my few issues then. While I love Trevor's vocals across the board, I feel like he moved up a register in terms of the higher screams, and sometimes they felt like a little too forced. I kind of liked him back in the first 2 albums where it was just very just Goblin-esque. Like he just sounded horrendous, but he also worked on his clarity on here too. So there's a lot of improvements, and there were just a couple of things I didn't like in here, but overall, like, this is an absolutely awesome album, dude. Deathmask Divine, I dare you to find a heavier chorus riff. Like, that song is just monstrous. And Climactic Degradation almost kind of abandons Melodeath for a second just to get brutal. But yeah, fantastic album, definitely a fan favorite, and yeah, number 3.
I got this one at 3. As with the other ones, I probably didn't like this album when I first heard it, but all the songs pretty much are now iconic after I finally understood what they were doing.
Right.
And then you go back and like, oh yeah, what a horrible night to have a curse. The riffs are better. The production is locked in. I like sometimes when Trevor goes higher because that makes his death growls that much more brutal.
Yeah.
But then again, sometimes it's too much of a I'm high, I'm low, I'm high, I'm low. Again, the songwriting, these songs, most of them probably stayed in their set to today. Great songwriting. Yeah, and when you look back on it, to me, it's number 3.
And so a couple years goes by, and on September 15th of 2009, we get Deflorate.
Deftones.
This album sold 12,000 copies in its first week in the U.S., placed at number 43 on the Billboard Top 200, which, again, is a pretty monumental event for a death metal band at this point in the game.
Murder band.
Ryan Knight comes in and replaces John Companion on guitars. Goodbye, John. Hello, Ryan. Welcome to the team.
What a beautiful addition.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
I 100% agree.
Got a stupid first name, though.
Ryan. Who'd ever be named Ryan?
All right.
People named Ryan.
Yep, right. This album, personally, for me, is my number 9, and it's only because I've spent the least amount of time with this record. Somewhere amidst the Black Dahlia Murder career, I fell off the boat for just a little bit and just didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with this album. In fact, when I was going through the ranking to do this, I said, oh man, I forgot about Deflorate, which is crazy. So for me, it's my number 9, and it's nothing against the album. I've just spent the least amount of time with it. The guitars sound better than they have yet on this record. Like, they're firing on all cylinders at this point as far as a band is concerned. The riffs are better. The leads are incredible. Ryan Knight, you do a hell of a job. The album has more of a kind of a classic feel to it. Like, it's not as brutal in most spots. It just has more of a good classic heavy metal flow to it. The riffing is insane. The leads are insane. A lot of these songs are killer. Denounced, Disgraced has super catchy hooks, and just overall it's a speedy, intense song. Like, at this point in the game, they're off to the races. Christ Deformed, that hook right off the bat, and the heavy-ass verse riff. Throne of Lunacy is a brutal pit beast. That lead is super tasty, and they've got low-end tremolos in there, and I've become such a huge fan of low-end tremolos over the years. I Will Return, I love that song in its entirety. That's just a banger of a song. But yeah, again, even though they are firing on better cylinders at this point, and there are some great songs, it's number 9 for me just because I've spent the least amount of time with it, but that's where I'm at.
I have this at number 7, and it's weird because in a lot of ways I see like some big improvements on here. Trevor has dropped that high scream down just a notch. It sounds a little bit more sinister now, and his vocal cadences get better with every album. Like, he's very clever in terms of like picking the meter he's following, and I think he does an excellent job on here. But the big improvement is Ryan Knight. Ryan Knight's guitar style meshes with these guys in a totally different way. Like, it gets more technical. It's not just, a lot of at the gates riffs anymore. There's like way more like interesting flourishes in the guitar playing. That solo on Throne of Lunacy, that was an element that really wasn't in their sound before. Like, no offense to John, he was a great riff writer, but in terms of like the leads seldom popped like they do on here. Necropolis, honestly, one of my favorite songs by the band, and possibly my favorite video, because I've been to that bowling alley and that venue numerous times, and the fact that they did a death metal video in bowling shirts in a bowling alley. Yeah, that's Black Dahlia Murder 101.
In fact, we were just there.
Yeah.
Less than 24 hours ago, we were at that venue. So.
But yeah, like, overall, I like all the changes on here. This album is short, to the point. It's aggressive. It's still melodic. But at the same time, I just like other albums a little bit more. But the improvements on here are very noticeable overall. And again, this has a lot of elements that would carry over to other albums.
I also have it at number 7. I think it was also an issue of lots of things were happening at that time, lots of musics and stuff, and it was like, oh yeah, Black Dahlia's got another thing. Well, didn't they have something like a year and a half ago? I don't know. I'm going to see him next week anyway, probably. I do love I Will Return. It's kind of an anthem. Throne of Lunacy is awesome. I do like how Trevor's vocals are lower, a little more meat on the bones. Yeah, I don't know why it's so low. Probably because you got to put it somewhere, right? But yeah, Necropolis is killer, and it just so happened to fall here, and I'm not sure what deflorate means, but I think it's got something to do with plants.
Yeah,
maybe
the removal of flowers, deflowering. That's exactly what that means too.
It's a fancy way.
Is that an ape joke?
I had this album ranked a little bit higher than everyone else. I actually have this ranked one above Nocturnal. I have this at number 4. Once again, in this discography, I feel like an album is a continuation of another album. This is basically another version of Nocturnal, the B-side of Nocturnal, with the guitars on steroids. And I think that's what really pushed the album over Nocturnal for me, in that Ryan Knight's addition to me was the last piece really missing in this band. You had everything else. You had great drums. You had a great bassist to complete the rhythm section. You had an excellent frontman. The guitars were great. The riffs were great. But you really needed a guy like Ryan Knight to push it over the top, and that's what he did. And while this album doesn't have as many of your, your concert hits or your classics that you hear all the time, I still think this is a solid musical offering from them. And number 4 without reservation.
Yeah, Ryan's resume and Arsis, I mean, that
dude.
definitely got him in the door.
Yeah.
But I've always seen this album as kind of like an overlooked one in the discography, but I mean, it's, a lot of quality here.
Moving forward, on June 21st of 2011, we have Ritual.
Super joint.
This album is my number 1. I've always loved this album. No member changes at all. Woot.
Hey guys, good job.
Album sold nearly 13,000 copies in its first week to place it number 31 on the Billboard 200. More dynamic of an album, and the first time Brian didn't write the music by himself. The riffs are now split 50-50 between Ryan Knight and Brian Eschbach.
Ryan and a Brian and a Brian and a Ryan.
Which I think was a really solid move for this band. This record to me is just awesome. You got this full band now, no member changes. Ryan's had a chance to really come in and lay down his flavor. They're jiving well at this point. Dude, Stirring the Seas of Salted Blood is one of my favorite Black Dahlia Murder songs, probably of all time. It's a banger. I mean, for me, it's up there with Thy Horror Cosmic. Like, it's just, that's an awesome song. Malenchantments of the Necrosphere.
Spill it.
Dude, how can you not like that song as a metalhead? That song is absolutely brutal. Dude, that intro riff in there is one of the best things, again, that I think they've written.
And if you spell that song title out on a Scrabble board,
you won. You won.
I mean, you got. If you do it with a triple word score, dude, you're winning.
Oh,
There's a lot going on in there. Actually, Rin was the one to show me this record when it first came out.
I don't remember that at all.
Yep, you were living in that crappy apartment.
Oh, and that narrows it down. Living with that whore.
That apartment that you smoked cigarettes in that you shouldn't have smoked cigarettes in.
Oh, yeah.
And also,
Dude,
she's not a whore.
She's a lovely lady.
She's a lovely lady, and I called her after the seafood dinner.
Yeah.
Whores and shitty places is my MO.
Conspiring with the Damned, that sinister bridge in that song is nasty. The Window, the awesome intro, the harmonies in that song, the chuggy little section to the ripping lead. I've always loved this record. I think really it hits home for me with Stirring Seas of Salted Blood and Malenchantments of the Necrosphere. But overall, it's my number 1.
I had it at number 6. I don't really remember when this album came out.
You don't say.
This is why it's at 6, and the last one was at 7. This is kind of the blurry period. There were things happening that I don't remember.
Care to share with you?
I don't. I'd share them if I remembered them. We were having some drinks, I guess. I don't know. Who knows? Fuck it. I do like On Stirring Seas of Cheese, Salted Blood. It's a completely different band. Moonlight Equilibrium is awesome. Melancholy and the Infinite Necros Plasty. That's a great one. Yeah, it just, for me, somehow got lost in the shuffle of things. But there are some bangers on here. Sonically, it sounds great. Everything's where it needs to be level-wise. Everybody's firing, but for some reason it just, I don't know. It's blurry.
I also had it at number 6. To this date, this is the longest Black Dahlia Murder album. The rest of them, kind of ran like about 35 minutes. This one was 45.
Yeah.
Like a lot longer, and you can kind of feel the length after a little while. Like, some of the songs kind of start to run into other. But I will say, like, this is their biggest album, not just in terms of like the length of the album, but they included like strings and pianos. There's like a definite, like, we're going for it and trying to make like the biggest, most polished album we possibly can. And for the most part, they succeeded. On Stirring Seas of Salted Blood is an amazing song. Like, it's more slow, brooding. It's just, very sinister sounding. The Great Burning Nullifier is a good, groovy, chuggy, angry song. The Window and Malenchantments of the Necrosphere.
Spell it.
I mean, dude, that very decapitated-esque, syncopated jug is an instant hook. And once again, with the writing kind of, balancing out between Brian and Ryan, I think, again, they were experimenting a little bit more with, like, technicality and some different songwriting dynamics. And for the most part, I thought it was a pretty solid win. I do think it does feel a little bit long at times, but overall, I like the fact that they kind of just went for it and just made a bigger, more lavish album and continue to expand on their sound.
I also had this at 6. 6. No, but seriously, I feel like this album discography ranking for me, the baseline seems to be Nocturnal for what I like and what I'm not crazy about. And to me, this is right below Nocturnal. They went crazier. They put in everything, including the kitchen sink. They pushed their creativity. They went about 15 to 20 more minutes worth of more material than they ever did. It wasn't bad. It just didn't have some of those memorable moments like the previous album. Also, a little bit bitchy and being kind of, a diva-esque. I thought that album was really dry. Not that was a bad thing, because with dryness, especially in the guitars, it means it cuts through and it's very heavy. But yeah, it seemed a little dry. It could have used some Vagisil, I thought. But
Gravy.
Great songs. The musicianship is out of this world. It gets a little, to borrow from Nick, it does get a little long in the tooth with some of these songs. But overall, it's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Next in line, coming in at number 3 for me, is Everblack.
Great Pearl Jam song.
Released on the 11th of June in 2013. Once again, album sold nearly 13,000 copies its first week. The Black Dahlia Murder's firing on all cylinders as far as selling album copies on the first week. Max Lavelle replaces Bart Williams on the bass, although Bart still produced the album, so it's not like he left with bad blood. Alan Cassidy replaces Shannon Lucas on the drums. Alan Cassidy is still the drummer for Black Dahlia Murder to this day. I've met Alan Cassidy a handful of times. He's a hell of a drummer. A great replacement, I think, to attempt to fill in Shannon Lucas's shoes. Like, they're very even-kiltered in a lot of aspects. The album name actually was a rebuttal due to an accusation that was made after the band played the Warped Tour that they were changing their direction. And so the band decided to say, fuck you, we're not changing our direction, here's Everblack. The album is noticeably darker and more heavy. It's blackened now.
Blacker.
As, the album title would suggest. Most of the riffs and even the tremolo are in a lower register. Like, this album is just straight mean. Goat of Departure is an intense, vicious song. The riffs are out of this world. Into the Everblack. That's a sinister song through and through. Phantom Limb Masturbation. Great song. Fun title.
Hard to do.
Not really. So Dave Chappelle taught us that if you sit on your hand long enough, you can give yourself what's known as the stranger.
Well, that's the stranger.
Yeah. The Phantom Limb, I think, you have to sever it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you're just taking it you're just taking it a step farther.
Is it a severed hand or a severed penis?
We're not recommending either of these.
I think some experimentation and some Wikipedia searching is in order after this video.
Shredlord, you're on the case.
Alrighty.
I don't know if one person can try both of the ways to do that, though.
So you do
it's
the
one or the
penis,
other.
I'll do the hand.
Okay, yeah, and then we'll just compile
then we'll
our
switch.
notes.
Then I'll chop my penis, you chop your hand.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Or if you've ever seen The Strain, it'll just pop right off.
Yeah.
The leads, I think, are better on this album. The melodies on this album are catchy. Everything is harmonized at most points. Every rope a noose. The verse with that dissonant melody is awesome. This album is what kids nowadays call slap ass.
Or slap in.
One of the girls I work with taught me the term slap ass. So this record is slap ass.
They're just making shit up.
Yeah, no, that's terrible.
Again, that's the younger generation.
I think the record is ill.
It is bussin'. No cap.
It's smack anus.
The song Their Beloved Absentee, dude, the vocal cadences on that song are awesome. Trevor's really stepping it up a notch vocally here, too. So, yeah, overall for me, number 3.
For me, it's number 2. I thought this was the perfect blend of Nocturnal and Ritual, and it got us to Everblack. The atmosphere, the solos are just nasty. Just nasty gross. To me, it's the best sounding album that they've put out thus far, and I really think it has to do with another album for Ryan and Brian to gel and get that chemistry better. You know, the first album, Ryan kind of probably felt a little rushed. Then on the second one, it's okay, we did this, but it was our first time doing this together. I'm sure we can figure out ways to improve upon it, and I really feel like they did with Everblack. They seem to be gelling together and just yin and yang in it, and it came out with a fabulous fucking album.
Yep, it's my number 2 as well. This might be, I think, their catchiest album. Like, every song in here, despite how brutal they are and blast beat driven, they are catchy. Lots of clever lead melodies. The lead melody on Blood Mine has been living rent-free in my head since I got this album. The opening track with the rainy ambiance, and then getting right into Inhale Is Where She Waits For Me, which is probably where the majority of my ex-girlfriends are waiting for me too. Just a great song, classic Melodeath hook, but again, that added brutality. That bridge comes in, you get the deeper vocals. Trevor sounds great on here. Like, honestly, this is one of my favorite vocal performances from him. He sounds clear, but he sounds like just really well pronounced. Production on here is absolutely perfect. This is just a flat out amazing album from start to finish. I don't think there's a weak track on here.
It is also my deuces. Yeah, what everybody said. They nailed it. They sound pissed. Everything's meaner. The songs are catchy, which is helpful. Into the Everblack, for God's sakes. Jesus. Statutory Aped in Hatred by Vines of Thorn. Great song. Just wait a couple years.
You think I'm scared of that? Think I'm scared of a little ape? It ain't nothing to me, man. I'm biting the fucking fart bubbles in the bathtub, man. I swear to God I am. Let's get it.
That's a good time.
Is it?
They finally got a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Proper formula. Yeah, it took them 6 albums to get there, and sometimes it be that way. Yeah, number 2.
So then moving on another 2 years, the Black Dahlia Murder releases Abysmal on September 18th of 2015.
Wasn't that a James Cameron movie?
They call him James Cameron. He's the greatest pioneer. No joke too big.
No, that was The Abyss, and it's boring as shit.
Abyss.
The director's cut's better.
Mary Elizabeth Master Antonio. Spell it.
I feel like there's like 4 hyphens in there.
Peter, Paul, and Mary, what are you doing?
Produced by Mark Lewis and Ryan Bart Williams once again. This is Ryan Knight's last album until his return in 2022. Placed 45th out of 200 on the Billboard. The album is slated to be more raw and more natural, as well as being more dynamic and developed. This is my number 7. I don't know. I think the mix is perfect on this album. The album is heavy as fuck. Some breakdowns, in my opinion, are almost considered to be brutal. The intensity and darkness of this album, at least for me, reminded me a lot of Unhallowed. Threat Level 3, that breakdown, Jesus Christ. Vlad the Impaler is just an awesome song. Refaced, I think, is heavier than hell. Possibly one of the heaviest songs this band has ever written. The Fog, the hook of that song just gets stuck in my brain. The song Asylum has huge black metal vibes. The Advent, all the sick grooves and all the sick harmonies. Again, this is my number 7, but I really like this album, so that's where I'm at.
I had it also at 7, but I don't know. I kind of sort of feel different about this album. This album I don't really know. I think because Everblack was so good and I liked it so much, maybe that's why Abysmal is so low on the ranking. There's really nothing wrong with it, but I don't know, maybe the songs to me just aren't as catchy and it doesn't resonate as much. Again, production's good. It's all good, man, but Everblack and then Abysmal. For some reason, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit lower. All right, it's my last place. And I like all these albums. And yeah, this one's awesome too. It's a Black Dahlia Murder album. It is exactly what I expect. I would say, to be fair, it is a little bit more brutal at times. Yep. And I do like that. I mean, I really haven't had much of an issue with any of their production overall. Everyone's doing a solid job. It's just these songs didn't resonate with me as much. And exactly what he said, it follows Everblack, which I see as one of their best albums. This one, it's just, a good, heavy Black Dahlia Murder album. Nothing really wrong with that. Reface is an awesome song. Vlad, Son of the Dragon is great. I like the gang vocals on this album in particular. I think they're, add like a fun punch to it. It does everything that I like about Black Dahlia Murder, except it just doesn't stand out as much. And I like the fact that they did shorten it down. Like, it's lean, it's mean. I think it's their shortest album overall, or at least to this point. And yeah, it succeeds at being a Black Dahlia Murder album, but just doesn't have as many standouts.
Yeah, I agree. This is my number 9 as well. I felt like this is a step in the wrong direction, but maybe, like Rin pointed out, the fact that it comes after such a strong album doesn't help it by any means. For me, it felt like a lot of this album was just kind of run on riffs and songs. I know it's short, but still, it didn't hold my attention as much as other albums did. Beautiful leads as always. The leads are incredible. There's nothing really stands out to me. It's just kind of like, all right, here's the album. This is the vibe again, and here's some things, and this is what we got going on. And it didn't stick with me at all. So, despite beautiful leads, which I am a whore for, it wasn't enough to pull it from the depths of number 9.
Yeah, and it's weird. They still did kind of everything right, but still, stuff's going to land where it's going to land.
Once again, moving on another 2 years, we get Nightbringers. This came out on the 6th of October in 2017. Much to the dismay of most, this is my number 8. Really great instrumentation on this album. Like, some of the best instrumentation I think this band has done to date. Charts at number 35 on the Billboard Top 200. Goodbye Ryan Knight for now. Enter in Brandon Ellis, who is a fuck of a guitar player.
Bad motherfucker.
Once again, his resume coming from Arsis. If you've ever seen Brandon Ellis play, and I have twice, that guy...
Or just YouTube his shit.
Yeah, dude, that guy can play guitar. Like... Man, such a good addition for this band. This was the best-selling album Black Dahlia Murder had direct-to-consumer pre-order, like, in Metal Blade history. This was the best of the best. Production on here is top-notch. Super tight for a lineup change, which is awesome. It is riffy and intense as all get out. Like, once again, those Ellis leads are just mwah. More vicious, yet more melodic. Alan's drumming is intense. Of God and Serpent, of Spectre and Snake is just an intense song. Nightbringers, the title track, is catchy. The breakdown is waltzy. Really, all the songs on this album kick ass, but much like everybody stated as far as Abysmal being just another Black Dahlia Murder record, like, they weren't reinventing the wheel here as far as their sound, but they were really good songs, written really well. But to me, this was also just another Black Dahlia Murder record, just with more kick-ass leads.
I had this at number 5, and honestly, I will say there are some interesting wrinkles on here, and I think part of that is due to Brandon Ellis's performance on here. There is like a little bit more of that like classic heavy metal, speed metal vibe to some of these songs. Namely, Kings of the Night World, which is a fantastic song. Those riffy gallops, instantly infectious. As Good as Dead, The Lonely Deceased, like, there's a little bit of a callback to something that kind of goes back further than their main influence of, like, melodic death metal. Like, it's, a little, like, death metal Judas Priesty kind of stuff in there. And I like that. That was a different flavor on here that I really hadn't heard. Like, of course, you still have all the, blast beat sections, good heavy chugs, breakdowns, the very rich mellow death melodies, but there were some different things coming in there. And this album has like a looseness. It's just sort of fun to listen to. And I like the fact that the album cover is kind of a play off of Nocturnal. I mean, it's Necrolord's artwork, but we get hues of red now. And I don't know, with red comes intensity. And there's like no filler on here. There's not even really a lot of spots of open atmosphere.
No.
Like, it's just go for the throat on each song. And that was kind of the pace on Abysmal, but I think here it's just done with a little bit more flash and a little bit more flavor. And yeah, Brennan Ellis was a worthy replacement for Ryan Knight. I mean, back-to-back awesome guitarists, and they both brought something different. So yeah, number 5. This is an absolutely awesome album.
I have it at number 3. Basically what he said. The leads, the new melodic influences, crystal clear production. Widowmaker is awesome. It's just the song titles and probably the new blood of the technical wizardry that just brought a new kind of fire, hunger to the songs. Intense and more memorable than Abysmal to me.
I also put this at number 3. This was the first Black Dahlia Murder album that I actually listened to all the way through. Brandon Ellis is what drew me in. Ryan Knight is a fabulous guitar player, but Brandon Ellis, like Rin was pointing out, is a little bit different. The way I think of it is Ryan Knight comes from more of like a jazz fusion-y background that a lot of tech death bands and stuff really love using as far as when their leads go, because of a lot of the chromaticism and a lot of the modal stuff that goes on there. It makes it sound super sophisticated and cool. Brandon Ellis can do some of those things, but that's not his style. He is the more retro throwback, you know? I look at Brandon Ellis as somebody I could have grew up with and hung out with, you know? I see him as this guy that's just an old school metalhead like me, somebody that grew up on Kiss, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, and Iron Maiden, you know?
The food groups.
Yeah. The trinity of heavy metal right there, man. And his addition adds a little different flavor. There's still excellent guitar work as in previous, but his flavor adds a little something different. And like John said, these songs aren't necessarily reinventing the wheel, but his take on some of these and some of those injections of some of those classic Priest things or some of those just classic heavy metal tropes added in there, that's where my love is at, so that's what kind of pulled me in. This probably should have followed Everblack, but it is what it is.
And now, 3 years later, the longest amount of time between Black Dahlia Murder releases, we have Verminous.
Which is a pretty good ginger ale if you got an upset tum-tum.
This was the last release with this current lineup. A majority of this record was recorded in Brandon Ellis' home studio, and a damn good job for that matter. So it comes out on April 17th of 2020. As you know, by this time, we're balls deep in the middle of the pandemic and blah, blah, blah. But this was a magic thing to come out during that time. I remember rating this album really high. The mix on this, of course, is solid. Released at number 99 on the Billboard Top 200, but who cares?
Dib it.
At this point in the game, a very awesome record. This, I think, was one of Trevor's finest vocal performances ever. He still had the lows and the highs. He had this awesome mid-range now at this point, and although he wasn't singing, like, a lot of his delivery just alluded to a more, like, melodic feel to go with the overall melodic awesomeness of this album. This reminds me a lot of older albums, actually, more so like Everblack and Ritual, but with more refined fluidity and musicianship. Far more melodeath than they've been in quite some time, with some blackened moments, most notably on the song The Leather's Apron Scorn. Sunless Empire, one of the best songs they've ever written. Just a groovy banger. The melodies, the harmonies in this song are awesome. Brandon Ellis, once again, your performance, wonderful. How Very Dead, all the rad melodies and the harmonies. Godlessly is thrashy and riffy as all get out. The Werewolf's Feast, all the classic heavy metal elements and the thrash, the riffing, the catchy grooves. Dawn of the Rats just has an epic, dark vibe to it. Very emotional. It's number 6 just because you gotta put it somewhere, but this is a fuck of an album.
I have this one at number 8, and it isn't as though I don't like this album. I really enjoy a lot of the stuff that they brought in, namely Trevor's vocals, finding that mid-range, and again, being a little bit more tuneful with his growls. I think that's yet another melodic aspect that they were working on here. Like, there's some transitional vibes in here in terms of like, hey, what would come next after this, because they were exploring some different stuff. In terms of the melodic aspect, the melodies pop on this. Like, actually, some of the melodic aspects I think are even stronger than some of the heavier aspects in here. Sunless Empire is an absolutely amazing song, but I also like that thrashy vibe you get on songs like Godlessly and Child of Night. Like, there's just some like extra viciousness, and it feels, I don't know, like a little bit more theatrical and campy at times. You can tell they were trying to do some different stuff, kind of spice up the formula a little bit. Most of it works. Some of it is like, well, all right, we'll see where it goes on the next album. But, you know, I have this one a little bit lower just because, I don't know, it's got at least kind of a bad memory attached to it, and we'll eventually get to that. Yeah. But, I mean, overall, musically, I think they were kind of opening some new doors here in terms of, like, you know, exploring what all they could do with their sound, because, you know, they've been the definition of consistency up to this point with only subtle changes. And this one had some slightly more dramatic changes in a way. So yeah, overall number 8, still a great album.
I had this album at, that's right, number 1. For me, I feel that, I don't know, they nailed it. I think it is because I think that this is Trevor's best vocal performance. And probably because this was the longest time between albums, so maybe they had a little more time to work in and out. Maybe it was finally Brandon being like, okay, here's all of my songs. Take them. I don't know. The experimentation worked. I like some of the more groovier mid-tempo elements, which makes the fast stuff faster and the slower stuff slower. I like how the guitars drop out and the bass just chugs for a minute, like 2 or 3 times throughout the record. It would have been awesome to see where they would have went from here, but this was, I don't know, like Sunless Empire. More of that would have been awesome. Leather Apron Scorn, removal of the oaken stake is awesome. Great album cover, great sonically sound, great songs, fire in the belly. Yeah, number 1 for me. They hit it on the head on this one for me.
I couldn't agree more with Rin. This is also my number 1. I think this is just a fabulous combination of everything the Black Dahlia Murder has done up into their entire career. Trevor is at the top of his vocal game. Brandon Ellis has an album under his belt to get more comfortable with the rest of the gentlemen and help provide some of his own more flavor into the writing. The musicianship is excellent. Their blend of heaviness and the melodic parts are just so strong that they give it an epicness, you know? It has moments of epicness or, you know, the more mellow death thrown in there than in quite some time. Those kind of flares really drove it home for me. And this lineup hit their stride.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like they were on top of the world, and this album is a perfect offering in my eyes from the Black Dahlia Murder. My favorite, easily.
So, we get to a point for this band, and this is something that to this day is still difficult to talk about. And I'm sure if you've been following the Black Dahlia Murder and you know who they are, you know where this is going. On May 11th of 2022, it was announced that Trevor had passed away. And while it was never really actually put out there how it happened, you know, here we are. I've met Trevor a number of times. I know Nick has. I know Rin has. Trevor was a solid dude, a hell of a performer.
Good guy.
A hell of a musician. I saw Trevor more at shows that he wasn't playing than shows that he was.
It's true.
Once again, being, you know, so close to where the Black Dahlia Murder was formed, every time an awesome show came to Toledo, there was Trevor. He was somewhere in the building. You could walk past him at any given time. He was very approachable, very kind.
Yeah, he was jolly and drunk at suffocation.
Oh, yeah, dude.
I talked to him about like a lumberjack-themed thrash metal band or something like that.
Yep.
And the cool thing was, like, after a while, it was just like, oh, yeah, there's Trevor. And then you'd say, yeah, what's up, man? How you doing? But it wasn't like, oh, my God, it's the guy from the band.
Yeah.
Right, like...
He was as much a metal fan as he was a performer, and you could talk to him about all sorts of bands. Like, he was one of metal's spirit animals.
Yes,
agreed.
Go out and say that.
Agreed. On October 28th of 2022, the band decided that they were going to play a tribute show in Detroit. Brian stepped down from rhythm guitar and took over on vocal duties, and then Ryan Knight rejoined the band as the rhythm guitarist. Yeah, that's where we were. I didn't make it to that show.
Either.
You know,
I watched them online.
We were gonna go, and it sold out really quickly.
Oh, super quick.
I mean, at that point in the game, it you know, it was gonna sell out
a couple
rather
hours.
quickly.
I think
So
it was.
it really wasn't.
Well, it was the show no one was expecting to get because, I mean, it still felt so fresh. It still feels
It's
fresh.
Yeah, dude, it really does. Like I hate out of all the.
What was it, 6-7 weeks ago?
Yeah, it
Feels
might
that
as-
way.
Yeah.
Right, it feels that way.
It hasn't even been 2 complete years yet.
Jeez.
Like it still hits home for me. It still hits kind of hard, you know, when you talk about the Black Dahlia Murder, because you can't. It's difficult to associate the Black Dahlia Murder with not Trevor, and like it just kind of has this like fog hanging over it now when I talk about the Black Dahlia Murder. Like you know, I mean, we see Brian now at countless shows. I see him walk by all the time, and like, kudos to him for stepping up and taking vocal duties. But like, to me, the Black Dahlia Murder isn't really the Black Dahlia Murder anymore. Although, in November of 2023, the band re-entered the studio to begin working on album number 10. I am curious to know what it sounds like.
We're going to have to give it a listen.
We're going to have to give it a whirl.
There's possibilities here. Like I said, Ryan Knight and Brendan Ellis, like, you have two awesome lead guitarists. There could be some great lead changes in there.
I've watched Brian do backup vocals for years now, and I mean, he's good at what he does. Yeah, he's solid. Brian, you do a solid job.
Yeah.
I know that the drums are mixed already. I saw on Alan Cassidy's Facebook that the drums are done, so they're making headway here. There will be a new Black Dahlia Murder album, and I'm stoked for it, but...
However...
Rest well, Trevor.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say to any of you guys, like, if you need somebody to talk to, fucking talk to somebody. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. But yeah. That brings us to the end of the ranking of the Black Dahlia Murder. A killer band, a giant staple and influence, I think, in all of our lives.
Good representation in metal in general. Killer live band, solid, approachable dudes.
Yep.
You know, just, you know, good representation for the Midwest here. Because, well, I know we get a fair amount of that, but there's a stigma about the Midwest, like boring and our weather sucks. And you're right on both accounts.
It's all true.
They were basically just your neighborhood buddies that, you know, play kick-ass metal, but are also, you know, fanboys at heart. It was passion, and it was obsession, and it was love that drove those guys and Trevor to start this band. And, you know, no matter how far along they got in the journey, they were continuing to just be part of the community and one of us.
Yeah.
Just one of us.
So, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon is there. It is also on our channel down in the right-hand corner of our banner. But if you're looking for Thralls of Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts there. We have old shirts that are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal. We have album reviews up the wazoo. We have collection updates. What's John Jamming will make a return eventually. Now that we've done this ranking, the next in line is the almighty Meshuggah, which is going to be so fucking awesome to rank and so sucky at the same time because I love Meshuggah.
Bring the chud.
Anyway, all the stuff we do here at Thralls of Metal, we do because of you guys. We genuinely appreciate all of you who continue to give us support and who have subscribed to the channel and watch our videos and want to talk to us for whatever reason. I don't understand, but you do. You guys come up to us at shows. We just had somebody come up to us at a show last night, so yeah, we enjoy it. The reason Thralls of Metal is what it is because of you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, but once again, thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, all that stuff. It means the world to us, and we will be back with another ranking at some point, but plenty of stuff coming. So, once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.
Sing to the sky, cursed and damn this life.